Today, I'm going to show you how to extend complicated backgrounds in Photoshop. Hey there and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on phlearn.com where we make learning fun. And in today's video, we're going to show you how to take a portrait that has a pretty tight crop and extend the background. This is something we do super often, especially when you're trying to make like a portrait type image. Maybe you want to put it as a horizontal banner, as a website, or top of your Facebook profile, whatever you have. Now, if someone's just photographed like there's buildings and stuff like that behind them, like they're in outdoors, then it gets like not impossible, but almost impossible, because basically either you have to find a similar image or hand paint an entire background, which is very difficult. So we still have a somewhat complicated background, but we're going to show you how to use simple tools like the brush tool to go ahead and extend this. Now, if you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can download this sample image on phlearn.com. Just click right up here for that link, boop, 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 and you'll be able to follow along. So here's our photograph today, and as you can see, the background is a little bit complicated. We've got these circle figures here. You can see it's a little bit dark on the top, and it gets a little bit lighter as it goes down, and of course our subject is going right to the edge. So what happens if we want to extend this? Well, I'm going to hit C for the crop tool, and we're going to click and drag from the left to the right, because I want to do a decent extension on this. Like, we want to have this maybe be applicable for a web banner. So we're just going to bring that right to the right, and I'm going to hit that checkbox right up there. Okay, now what I want to do in this case, because we have a few different layers, let's go ahead and sketch up or mark up how we're going to approach this. So we obviously have our background, okay, the background color that just goes from this red, it kind of gets darker up here and darker down there. And then we have these other shapes that we basically have to recreate. So when I do something like this, I want to think about it in 3D. So I'm going to start with the thing that's furthest back, in which case this is just this background here. And then we're going to move forward, which would be these red dots. And then if we needed to do any work with our subject, which in this case we don't really have to, so that's nice, then I would work on my subject. Now, I also got to say that we're extending our background this way, which is much easier than extending it this way. And the reason is because there's no information here, so basically we would have to hand paint an entire new shirt on our subject. We're going to stick with this because it's something that I think we can all do, and definitely a situation that we're going to run into. So let's go ahead and start with, if you just have your background layer, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to hit B for the brush tool. So the brush tool is going to be our key tool for this effect. So B for the brush tool, we're just going to right click, and we're going to make sure that we're choosing a large brush, and our hardness you want to be set at 0. Now you can also hold Control and Option and then click and drag to the right to the left to change your brush size. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control Alt and right click and drag. Now what I want to do is actually grab some of these colors from the background. So with my brush tool still selected, we're going to hold Alt or Option, and you're going to see a little eyedropper here. Go ahead and click, which is going to sample that color, and then we can start painting this color in. Now, right now, my flow and my opacity are both set to 100%. And my goal here is basically just to go ahead and paint in with this color, and then we're going to focus on the gradient in just a second. So let's go ahead and paint this in. There we go. And you can see it's a huge brush, so it does take a little bit of time. If your computer is starting to slow down a little bit, that's totally okay because it's a huge brush. Now let's go ahead and make our brush a little bit smaller here. I just want to get the background, like basically the majority of that color, we just want to lay that down. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now you can see I covered up my photograph itself a little bit. That's actually totally okay. At this point, I'm not worried if I cover my subject up or cover my photo. We're going to use layer masks to remove that later. For now, we just want to make sure it looks as natural as possible. So next we're going to create a new layer. We're going to hit B for the brush tool. Let's choose a large soft edge brush again. Let's go ahead and sample this slightly darker color by holding Alt or Option. And now I want to bring my flow down. We're going to bring our flow down to about 20%. So you can hit Shift 2 on your keyboard, or you can just click and drag right here or type in 20%. Now, with our flow of 20%, I gotta go over an area a couple of times in order for that effect to really start to, lay down that color. So this is a nice way to kind of like have a smooth build-up effect, okay? And this is exactly what we want for this type of gradient, because we want it to be a little bit variable. In this case, I don't really want to use just like the gradient tool. You could, but I want it to look more photographic, and because I can add in some of this variation with my brush tool, it's going to look a little bit more like a photo and a little bit less like we just did it in Photoshop, which we did, but we don't want it to look like we did that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and grab this color here, and we're going to start bringing some of that color in as well. So any cues you can get from the background of your original photo, it's a really good idea to start pulling these in if possible. There we go. And my goal here is just to create a photo or a background here that really doesn't look like it was done in Photoshop. I want maybe add a little bit of vignetting. You can see I took this dark corner here, just kind of adding it in here. There we go. And with a low flow, we have a large amount of variation that makes it very easy to do this sort of effect. Okay, now if you paint a little bit too much, like if I'm like, you know what, that corner is a little bit too dark, it's not a big deal. All you have to do is sample this color right next to it. So again, hold Alt or Option, sample there, and just paint a little bit, and it'll lighten that up. Fantastic. So you can see that does a really nice job filling in the background. Definitely painted over top of our subject, but you're going to see in just a second that's not actually that big of a deal. So we laid down our background, and now it's time to work on those circles because we do have all these other elements in this background. So we're going to start with these lighter colored circles here. Now you can see they're not actually perfect circles. They're a little bit more irregular. So I want to use an irregular tool, something like my regular old lasso tool, to create these. So I'm going to hand draw these circles. There we go. And right now, this is just selections, right? That's all I'm doing here is making selections. And then I can just fill these selections in just a little bit. And the nice thing about doing all this on, different layers is I could add or remove as many of these as I want at any point too. Like if I'm like, oh, that was too many, I can just erase some of these away very easily. Right, there we go. So you can see that was just selections. Now we want to make a new layer. So every time we create a new effect, we want that to be on a new layer so we could layer mask it out or erase it if we need to. So now that we have those selections, we're going to go back with our brush tool. We're going to hold Alt or Option, okay, and then grab this color. So same color here. We're going to go to Edit, down to Fill, and I'm going to go to my foreground color. So I grabbed this pink here, made it my foreground color, and now we're going to fill with that. So let's hit OK. All right, let's hit Control-Command-D to deselect, and we can see getting there, but it doesn't quite look realistic, does it? We've got a couple more things to do. So the next thing we want to do is apply a blur to this layer. So we're going to right click here. We're going to go to Convert to Smart Object, because anytime you do a blur, it's a good idea to create a smart object first. That way you can change your blur if you don't like it. So we're going to go to Filter. We're going to go to Blur, and I'm going to go to one of my favorite blurs. It's called the Box Blur. And this actually creates a more photographic blur than the Gaussian blur, in my opinion. It tends to look a little bit more realistic, okay? Now, my goal here is to kind of match the blur from this original photograph. So I can change my radius here. Let's hit OK. I think that actually looks pretty nice. This is the original photograph, and these are the things that I just made. Check this out. If I want to change the blur, all I have to do is double click right here where it says Box Blur, and I can change this at any time. Okay? So it's very, very easy for me to get in here and make changes, but I think the original actually looks pretty good. So we have our first effect down. Now it's time for the larger circles. Let's go ahead and make these layers invisible. These look a little bit more like a perfect circle to me. So we're going to go ahead and create some of those and at different sizes. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to use my elliptical marquee tool here and just hold the Shift key down and make a few of these. I'm not making them absolutely perfect circles, but there we go. A little bit closer than what we had before. All right, just hit undo there. Fantastic. And I'm trying to space these out like fairly evenly so I don't have too much competition with my shapes from before. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we're gonna hit B for the brush tool. We're gonna go ahead and grab this color here and start painting it in. Now I could do a fill, but I want these to be maybe just a little bit of variation in here, so I'm gonna just paint them in with my brush tool. You can hit Control or Command H to hide your selection, and that'll give you a good idea of what you're actually doing. Now, I'm going to click on my color, maybe make it a little bit brighter, because like this one I didn't really see, that one I didn't really see. And this is also just going to help give a tiny bit of variation in there, which should help this effect look a little bit more realistic. Cool. Well, that looks pretty good. Now, turning this off and on, I want to add a blur to this. So we're going to right click, convert to smart object, then we'll just do the same thing. Filter, down to blur, and to box blur. And we're going to choose, there we go, something right about here looks actually pretty good. Let's hit OK. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and turn these layers off. Here's what we have with our start. We added the very back. Then we're coming a little bit more forward, adding more detail, a little bit more, and then a little bit more. So now what we need to do, and keep in mind, of course, every image is going to be super different. But my goal now is to get these not visible over top of my subject. So we're going to hold Shift, click all of these layers, and group them together by hitting Control or Command G. So I can just turn them all off and on. Now, I can add a layer mask and just simply paint black on my layer mask. This is just with my brush tool. I'm just going to paint black on my layer mask right over top of my subject, making sure that it's visible right at the edge. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in there. Fantastic. So I want my subject to be completely visible, and then it's going to be invisible right there at the edge. Oh, painted black when I meant to paint white. So if you paint black on your layer mask, it'll make it invisible. White will make it visible. Fantastic. So we're looking pretty good, and we're actually almost done. The last thing I want to do is add a little bit of noise to this background. If I zoom in to my original background, you're going to see a little bit of noise here, which just makes the effect look more like a photograph. Now, if I zoom into one of these parts that I made, you can see there's no noise here, and so it really doesn't look like a photograph. We want to add the noise levels from our effect to the noise levels of the background. So it's actually really easy to do. We're going to go ahead and take this entire group. I'm going to right click and we're going to convert this to a smart object. So now the whole group itself is a smart object that I can turn off and on, and I can add filters like noise. So let's go to filter, down to noise. We're going to go to add noise. There we go. And zooming in, here we can see the amount of noise. So obviously we don't want to go that high because it won't look realistic. You can just use your up and down arrows here to add or remove more noise. Let's see, like 2%, or you can just type this in. There we go, 3%. My goal here is to try to find the bare border between my subject. See the noise here, my subject's background? I'm scrolling over to try to find if I can see a difference. Like at 10, it's very obvious where that difference is, right? It's like here, so that level of noise is more subtle than here. But at 3%, that actually looks pretty much the same. So let's hit OK. And now the level of noise really makes it look photographic and blends perfectly with our subject. So obviously I did a crazy huge background extension, and we kind of have a little bit of like a fun background in general, but if you wanted to extend it over here, you could do that as well. Also, by the way, you can double click here and open your entire smart object. And let's say I wanted to remove these like white dots, I could simply remove those, save this and close it out, and then it's going to automatically update on my other document. There we go, and you can see all those are now in fact removed. And that's how we extend complicated backgrounds in Photoshop. Photoshop. If you want to get more free tutorials every single week, go ahead and subscribe by clicking up here. YouTube thinks you're gonna like these videos. And if you want to learn more complicated tasks like retouching and compositing, click right up here to learn a little bit more about Phlearn Pro. Thank you so much. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye everyone.
Hi there, this is Unmesh from Piximperfect, and today I'm going to share with you one of the easiest ways to color grade in Photoshop. We're going to explore some essential Photoshop and Camera Raw tips and tricks to create drama with color. Also, if you want to go a little more advanced, you will also learn some lighting techniques to bring life to your images. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we begin, I have something special for you. The complete interactive visual notes with all the downloads and instructions is available for you to check out right here. Thanks to our sponsor Milanote for helping us create these beautiful notes in no time. Milanote is a super easy to use tool to organize your creative projects. As a creative professional, we never know when inspiration strikes us. With Milanote, you can easily capture inspiration from all around the web, whether it's a simple image, link, or a video. When you keep your inspiration in browser bookmarks and all of those folders and desktops, it is impossible to see the connection between these ideas. Placing your initial notes, images, and ideas onto Milanote's freeform canvas, you can start to imagine things that don't exist yet by making connections between things that do. Once your ideas are in place, we can use this to create a mood board or put together a creative brief for your next big project. They have templates for everything, so you don't have to start from scratch. You can also add text notes, photos directly from your iPhone using the latest Milanote iPhone app. For all other devices, you can access it directly from your browser. Creative professionals from the most prominent companies use it, from Google, Apple, Nike, Uber, and guess what? Even Adobe. And you know what's best? You can get started for free. Try Milanote right now using the link in the description. And if you're interested in the Pro version, you can use the code PIX20 to get 20% off Milanote Pro forever. Back in the magical world of Photoshop, and if you want to go ahead and download this photo and follow along, you already know what to do. Check the links in the description. Now, let's get started. What we're going to use here is Adobe Camera Raw, but as a filter. Now, anytime you apply any filter, you want to back up. So first of all, let's make a copy of the background layer by pressing Ctrl or Command J. Make sure that the background layer is selected. Then press Ctrl or Command J. Now you have a copy. You can actually name this color grade if you wish to keep it organized. Before you apply any filter, keep in mind to convert this into a smart object. Why? So that any filter you apply, you will be able to change the values later, and it's completely non-destructive. So with the color grade layer selected, go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, and hit OK. You can always click on Don't Show This Message again, so that the second time you do it or the next time you do it, this message won't show up. Hit OK. But I keep it off because I teach you and I teach people, so I gotta tell them. So once this layer is converted to a smart object, which you can tell by the symbol right there, you can go to Filter and then Camera Raw Filter. And inside of this, we want to apply some colors to the highlights and the shadows. That's it. And the easiest way to do it is going to split toning right there. You see this icon right there? It's called split toning. If you hover over it, it will say split toning. Self-explanatory. Now, in here, we're going to talk about balance later. Just focus on highlights and shadows. So what color you want in the highlights and what color you want in the shadows. However, if you just change the hue, if you just select a color, let's say I want blue in the shadows, it just won't show up. Why is that? Because the saturation is 0, or the amount of color is 0. You need to push it. But what's the best way to check which color will suit the best? Well, I've got a trick for you. All you gotta do is to hold the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac when you move through hue. So when you hold the Alt key or the Option key, and then when you drag this, it will assume momentarily that the saturation is at 100%. So let's say if we stay at 185, this is the look if we hold the Alt key. So if I hold the Alt key and if I click and drag in here at 189, this is the look. If I increase the saturation, it's the same look. So temporarily, it will assume that the saturation is at 100. So it helps you choose the right color, which you can later control the saturation anyway. So let's decrease the saturation all the way to 0. And you can use this trick by holding the Alt key or the Option key. Just drag and see which color suits the best in the shadows. So I'm gonna go with somewhere about this cyan-ish kind of color, or more bluish. Let's go for 222. That suits best. Now let's control the saturation. How much of this color do you want? So I'm gonna go for, let's go for a little higher number in here. We're gonna make it moody. All right, this is fine. Let's choose the highlights. So hold the Alt key or the Option key again, and then click and drag on this slider, and we're gonna go for a yellowish color. Let's go for 65-ish. Yes, that looks nice, but it's kind of too much, of course, because it assumes the saturation to be at 100. So we're gonna choose a saturation of, let's go for about 70-ish, 74-ish. And there we have a kind of look. It's not absolutely amazing, but we have got a good starting point. Now, what is balance? Balance determines what is shadow and what is highlight. So it is that kind of borderline. So let's suppose this is shadow, half of this table, this is shadow, and half of this table is highlight. And if we choose blue for the shadows, it's gonna apply blue to half the table on the right hand side or your left hand side, and it's gonna apply half the table as yellow. Now, if you change the balance, this border between the highlights and the shadows, or I don't know which side was which, will change. That's it. So if we change the balance, see, the highlight border is moving towards the dark area, meaning now you have less color in the shadow and more of the color in the highlights. If you move it towards the left hand side, the opposite will happen. So for me, I'm going to keep it at about, let's go for, how about we take it to the negative side, just a touch. -2 or -3 is good for us. Now that we are here in Camera Raw, why not explore more sliders other than the split toning? So let's explore the basic tab. So this is actually the basic tab. Select that and play with the exposure a little bit. So let's set the exposure in here to, let's decrease the exposure to create the mood in this case. This looks nice to me. Now, to make anything impactful, we increase the contrast. So let's bump it up a little bit to about, see, somewhere about, let's go a little higher. So we are going a little higher. I know it's crushing the shadows, but we're gonna increase the shadows later. That doesn't matter. So we're gonna go for about 30. Okay, so let's say the highlights. So how much highlights do you want? Do you want less of it, more of it? I think the normal was fine, maybe just a hair to the right hand side. Now, as I said, since we increased the contrast, it crushed the shadows a little bit. So let's increase the shadows. So we're gonna increase it to about 40. What do you think? Even more if you want to add some more brightness in the shadows. So let's go for about 50% or 50 number, whatever you want to call it. Now white, I'm gonna keep it at the way it is, because if I increase it, it looks good. But later we're gonna add some lighting effects. So let's save it for that. But anyway, I'm gonna just increase it a touch, about 13-14%. Blacks, let's decrease it. Now, if you hold the Alt key or the Option key, it's gonna show you which areas are losing details, but we are not worried about that. It's all about creating that mood. As long as it looks beautiful, as long as the results are amazing, the client is not gonna look at the image and say, oh, that area is clipped, I'm worried about that. Don't worry about anything. Just go to a photography art gallery. You will find some international award-winning images and also some historic, most important images with the background completely clipped out and maybe the sky clipped out. It does not matter. Photography, in my opinion, is an art. As long as it looks cool, we are good. All right, anyway, so this is all right. So do you want a little bit of clarity? Let's just give a little touch of it. Dehaze a little bit. Wow. Dehaze does bring a little difference in there. So let's go for 12. Yes, that number looks good. Now there's a difference between vibrance and saturation. Saturation amps up the color of every single pixel. Doesn't matter if it's a highlight or a shadow. Doesn't matter if it's the darkest pixel of the image or the brightest one. Unless it's black or white, exactly completely black or white, it will amp up the saturation or the amount of color of that pixel. We do not want that. We just want to increase the color of the midtones or the areas that are already saturated a little bit. So for that, we need to just bump up the vibrance. So let's increase the vibrance to about, usually I somewhere don't go beyond 45. So for this example, 33 or 30 is good. So let's keep it at that, and keep in mind, anytime we can come back to this and change the value. So that's cool. Now that we are here, let's go ahead and apply some sharpening to it. So let's go to the sharpening tab, which is the detail tab right there, and increase the amount all the way to the right first. That's the one thing that I do all the time. Then control the radius, and then in the end, we adjust the amount. So when you control the radius, hold the Alt key or the Option key and keep on increasing it. And stop at the moment where you begin to see these halos around the edges. So from the left hand side, keep on increasing it. Just when you begin to see the halos, stop. For me, it's going to be about 1.3, 1.4. A little bit halo here and there is fine. And how much details you want. Hold the Alt key or the Option key. If you take it to the right, you'll have more. If you take it to the left, you'll have less. If you hold the Alt key, it will show you where the details are. I'm not really sure if you can see it on your screen because I'm working on a 4K monitor right now, so watch in 4K if you can. So there we go, and let's just control the amount. So we're gonna keep the amount somewhere about 70, 71, that's fine. I want you to have a close look at the lipstick. It's not popping enough. We really want it to pop. We just add some saturation to it. We just add some saturation to the reds. So let's go to the saturation tab, or HSL. Let's go there, and we just want to play with the saturation of the reds. So we simply increase it and have a look. Lips become interesting. So here's the before, here's the after. Interesting, isn't it? So we're going to keep it at about 53. Now time for us to add some special effects to it. To add special effects inside of Camera Raw, we need to go to the FX or effects folder. Click on that one right there. Now, if you want to add grain, you can, but first, let's add some vignetting. So we're gonna take it to the left to add some darkness around the edges. Now, let me give you a tip right there. Take it all the way to the left, right? And then decrease the feather all the way to the left. That way you are seeing which areas the vignette is applied. Then you control the midpoint and the roundness. So how inside you want it to be or how outside you want it to be. For this image, 50 is fine. And roundness is something you can also control. If you want it to be completely round or square like that, that's also something you can do once you have adjusted those, and then you can feather it all out and control the amount. So you're gonna keep the amount and adjust the midpoint. So for me, we just want focus over there. So let's keep it at about 24, so that only that area that we want our viewers' attention to go, only that area is bright, rest of the areas are black. So now let's add some feather to it. How much feather you want? About 50 is fine. Now amount, I think it's very dark, so let's go for somewhere about this 38 or 39 looks good to me. Keep in mind, when the amount is in minus, it goes dark. When the amount is in plus, it goes bright. So we're gonna go to minus 40, that's okay. And once you're satisfied with all of this, and by the way, why not add some grain to it? So let's zoom in and add some film grain effects. So let's add about 43%. You see the grain right there? You're adding a little bit of grain. You can also control the size of the grain if you wish to. So for me, I'm gonna keep it at that, and also the roughness, how rough you want the grain to be. I just want minimal grain effect, and there you go. Just a simple one. If you don't want to have it, you can keep it at 0 as well. That's also something you can do. But I want to have a little bit. It just adds some texture to the photo, which is pleasing to the eyes. Alright, once you're all good, hit OK. Now, as I said, keep in mind, you can always change these values if you wish to. So if you sometimes think, oh, I need to increase the highlights a little bit, you can always go back here by double clicking on Camera Raw. It takes you back to the exact same settings you had put in. Have a look at this, and then you can just adjust the highlights from here. For me, it's fine, so I'm just gonna hit cancel. See how easy this was to calculate this image? Have a look at the before and after. So here is the before, here is the after. Drastic change, isn't it? Now you can control the opacity if you think this is too much. Decrease the opacity and then you can increase it. That's absolutely upon you. I can keep it at that, about 49% opacity. This looks cool. But if you want to take it a step further, if you want to add some lighting effects and interesting shine to the image, stay tuned. So first of all, let's start with adding more attention to the eyes. Here's how you do it. Create a curves adjustment layer. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. Now, take this slider right there, as you can see, this slider, to the left, making the brights brighter. Just focus on the eyes. Look nowhere else. Where you're losing the highlights, it does not matter. Just the eyes matter. Alright, so we're going to take it to the left, Actually, the eyeballs, that's it. This is okay. Now, you will select the mask and then press Ctrl or Command I. Now, you can do this the simple approach. You don't have to do it in a complex way. I've made videos about it, but you can just simply do it. Look at where the light is coming from. So the catch light is here. So always the reflection light, or the light that reflects off the iris, will always be on the opposite side. So here, this area will be bright. So let's make sure the flow and opacity is at 100 and the foreground color is white. Make the brush a little bigger, make it just a little softer, and just dab right there. Okay, this looks good. Now make the brush smaller, softer, and paint with black on the areas where it shouldn't have been. So you're gonna just paint it black right there. Easy stuff. Paint black around the pupil. Alright, now we have something. If you want, you can also apply some blend if to it. So double click on the right hand side of the layer. Take the slider of the underlying layer from left to right. Just like this. Hold the Alt key or the Option key. Click on the slider to break it apart. To make the transition smoother. Hit OK. Now you do not have to create this eye highlight for the other eye as well. You can just simply copy. So with the curves 1, or let's name it eye 1 or eye left, our left. Just select that and then press Ctrl or Command J. We have a copy. It looks awful because we haven't moved it. Just with the help of the move tool right there, move it to the right eye. There you are. Simple. Now, we have to do some erasing here. So we will make sure the mask is selected. Take the brush, black as the foreground color, and then just simply erase it. No big deal. Gone. Have a look. Here's the before, here's the after. We have some highlights there as well. Now you can control the opacity of individual eyes. So this is eye right, and that one is eye left. Now I think eye left has a little more intensity because the light is falling on there, but I still think there needs to be a reduction in opacity. So we're gonna go for 75. Right eye is okay. And have a look at the before and after again. Here's the before, here's the after. Such a magical difference. If you look at the image closely, there is light coming from the back, and you can tell that by looking at the edge of the hair and the body, right? So the light is of course coming from the back and on the left hand side. So let's add some flare to it. Very simple to do. There are lots of ways to add flare in Photoshop. However, what I'm gonna do, select the topmost curves adjustment layer so that the next curves that we create is on top of that. With the topmost selected, click on the adjustment layer icon and then create curves. Now we want it to be a little brighter, so we're gonna take it to the left. And this is before creating flare. So we are not creating a real flare, just an atmosphere of light. We are just making it a little brighter. The light has a little yellow color to it. So how do we get yellow inside of curves? Just decrease the blue. Why? Because blue is the opposite of yellow. RGB opposite of CMY. I'm just trying to make sure that you remember that. Blue. Decrease the blues in the highlights. Something like that. Wow, that is also a nice effect, isn't it? But anyway, we don't want it all over the image. If you want it, you can keep it at that. That's your image. You gotta choose. Okay, so with the mask selected, press Ctrl or Command I to invert it. Then you can take the brush, take a huge brush like this, and then just paint with white right there. We are creating that nice kind of light. See what it did? Added that dimension. Now, if you want to erase it, you can do that as well from certain areas. So we can change the color to black by pressing X. X toggles the foreground and the background color. Now, let's zoom out and let's decrease the flow a little bit. Let's go for 20%. We're just making it a little softer, something like this. This works for us. I like that. Or alternatively, you can also do this with the gradient tool. So this is the gradient tool right there. You can choose the radial one, the second one, which is called the radial gradient. Now with the radial gradient, you can select the gradient here. This one, the first one, which is black to white. Hit OK. Now if you do it, opposite thing will happen. So you can just click on reverse. Now the light will be added that way. So that's also
Do you want to learn all the skills and techniques you need to create incredible designs?
something which you can do. Right. So this is also a type of light that you can add. Have a look at the mask right here. That's what it's doing. Look at that. Okay, now once we have that, you can choose to add a flare if you wish to. There's an easy way to do it. We've already talked about it. It's using a gradient. You can click on this adjustment layer icon and then choose gradient, the second one. Now you can create a gradient, single click on in here. You can create a gradient from color to transparent. So the second one here, right there, is actually color to transparent. Or you can just make sure that the top slider on the left has opacity 100 and the top right slider has opacity 0. And the top bottom slider, you can choose any color you want. You can double click on it to pick the color. So we're gonna choose, let's say, this yellow color right there. Let's saturate it a bit. Hit OK. And as it goes to the right, we can choose, you know, an orangish color, something like that. Hit OK. Hit OK again. And then change the style from linear to radial. And you can actually move this anywhere you want. So I'm going to keep it somewhere about there. You can actually increase the size by increasing the scale. So you can just increase it how much you want it. So for us, if you want it this much, hit OK. And then you change the blend mode to screen, because I want to make sure that this is brightening it. Screen is the blend mode which brightens stuff. You always want to make sure that even by accident, it's not darkening anything. So let's change the blend mode from normal to screen. There you go. That way it makes sure that it's just brighten. So this is normal, which is just the color on top. It's darkening the hair. If you have a look, the hair was even brighter. After applying it, the hair went a little darker. We don't want that to happen. So change the blend mode from normal to screen. So now we have something to go for. Here's the before, here's the after. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Zoom out and have a look. Zoom out at the image, look at it, before, after. If you don't like it, decrease the opacity and see if you like it or not. For me personally, if you ask me, I don't like it, so I'm not gonna keep it. But I gave you the option. If you want it, you can have it. Also, if you always want to change, if you want to change the location, you double click on the symbol right there. You can just move it anywhere you want, just for, you know, certain effects. So I'm gonna keep it right there and keep it turned off, if you, just to show you what can be done. So I'm gonna keep it. Let's turn it off. Let's add some more effects in here, and this is one of the most important effects that will make a world of difference. Now, as the light is coming from the back, we want some parts of the subject to give some shine. And how do we add some shine to it? By simply dodging. And by the way, if you're not aware, dodging means brightening and burning means darkening. And that's why we get the term dodging and burning. Alright, so let's create a curves adjustment layer. We're going to do a different kind of dodge, because in the dodge we want a little bit of the yellow. So we're going to add a little brightness in there. Alright, and we're going to add a little yellow. By going to the blue channel, we're going to decrease the blues to add the yellow to it. Alright, now in the yellow, we want to remove the greens, or we want to add a little magenta. So we will go to the greens and decrease it. So we have a dodge layer right there for brightening stuff. Let's go back to the RGB and increase the overall. Alright, now select the mask right there and press Ctrl or Command I to invert it. We only need to paint on the areas which we want to brighten. So simply select the brush with a flow of 1 or 2 or 3, anything you're comfortable with. I'm gonna go with 2%. Make sure you have selected the soft round brush, and then just start highlighting a couple areas. If you're using a Wacom tablet, you can of course choose a higher flow and then set the flow to pen pressure and the opacity to pen pressure as well. So I'm just gonna decrease the size of the brush. Alright, and then just start highlighting these areas with white. Make sure the foreground color is white and simply start highlighting these areas. Parts of the hair, here and there randomly. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna go for 10% and I'm gonna keep it at pen pressure. So I'm gonna choose the brush, one of my favorite ones, soft round pressure, opacity and flow. So it sets the opacity and flow to pen pressure, meaning the harder I press, the more the opacity and the flow will be. So let's set it that way. Probably want to set it to 15%. See, easily I'm adding some highlights here and there. If you think the brightness is not high enough, you can actually increase it. And I think it needs more yellow, so I'm going to go back to the blue channel and decrease the blues. And go back to the green channel and decrease the greens a little more. Alright. And that's the advantage of creating these curves adjustment layers, because anything can be changed later. Look at the difference we made. Here's the before, here's the after. Just a little difference here. Alright, so we have added some on the hair. Here's the before, here's the after. Just some shine. Let's make sure all of the areas that need the shine have the shine. And it's absolutely fine if some area clips. It just adds to the beauty of the photo. I'm going to show you later in the tutorial how to get rid of that and how to solve that, fix that in an artistic way. It's okay if you lose data in some areas, that's fine. Alright, now have a look at that. Here's the before, here's the after. Adding some really bright spots helps. Now, let's have a look. Before, after. I'm just decreasing the opacity. If you think this is too much, you can always decrease the opacity. So I'm going to keep the opacity at somewhere about 75%. There we have. This is just for the hair. We can actually name this hair. Now make another copy of this one. Just with the hair layer selected, Control or Command J. And with this one, we will just do it on the skin and the other areas. So first of all, let's delete the mask. Delete it, and we're going to create a new mask. Hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask button to create a negative mask. Now let's start painting on these areas. So before, after, just a touch of shine there. And you can actually change that. If you want a lot more magenta here, we'll go to the green channel and decrease it. This adds a little more magenta. Go to the blue channel and decrease it. It will add a little more yellow. If you go to the RGB channel, this is for brightness. A little more brightness does go a long way. There you go. Before, after. Just a touch. Now let's have a look at the overall before and after. Here's the before, here's the after. It is going in the right direction. Let's go back to this one and let's do a little bit, just a touch of the face and the neck right there. See what kind of highlights we are adding? It's really making a difference here. Now for this part, you can actually do with a soft brush like this. And then erase it in the end. So now press X, get the black color, and then erase it. You can increase the flow for that one. Let's go for 20%. If you want to see the mask, you can hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask to see it, and you can erase it from the top if you want. Hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask to view it again. Now if you want to remove this brightening from the dark areas, you can also do that. Let me just go back a little. Alright, if you want to automatically remove it from the dark areas, double click on the right hand side of the layer. This takes us to the layer styles dialog box. Inside of that, in blend diff, take the slider of the underlying layer from left to right. It will automatically hide in the dark areas. We don't want to keep it that harsh, so we'll hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart, and then break it like this. There we are. Have a look. Here's the before, here's the after. You can also do this in other parts of the image as well, like the nose. So select the mask right there, and this time let's try on the nose. Now you can also do it in the hand as well. We really have come a long way. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I've not forgotten that. You might be saying, the highlights are too much, we're losing details in the highlights. That's fine. All you gotta do is to add curves adjustment layer at the top. Click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. It's okay for the brightest sprite to be a little dark, just a tad bit dark, so that when you print it, that area just doesn't go completely inkless. So here's what you do. You take the rightmost point and bring it down a little. Just a touch. Like that. There we are. And have a look. Here is the before. Here is the after. Now remember, everything we did was absolutely non-destructive, which means that if you want to change something in Camera Raw, you can go there. So let's go to Camera Raw right here. All you got to do is double click on it. Camera Raw will open up. Now, I think we need to add some faded effect to it. So let's go to the tone curve right there and just add some brightness to the shadows. Just make sure you are in point curve right there. So we will add that and add an overall shadow just like this. See what kind of mood we are creating here? Hit OK. See what changes it makes? Have a look. It makes a world of difference, doesn't it? So have a look. Here's the before and here is the after. If you want to add some more edge to the light, I think we need to add more yellow to it. So if you look at the light right there that we had added, I think we need more yellow. So let's go to the blue channel right there and take it down even further. See that? See what it's doing to it? We're going to increase the opacity to 100. See the yellow we are adding there? I'm absolutely liking it. Let's increase the brightness. Not much. Just a touch. Have a look now. It's much better than before. And there you are. Before, after. So there you go. That's one of the easy ways to color grade in Photoshop. Now, some of you, my friends, might say, Unmesh, that wasn't easy. That was way, way difficult. It's okay. All you need to remember was the camera raw adjustment step. That's it. Anything after that requires a little mastery over the curves adjustment layer. And I highly recommend this video. Once you go through this video, I can guarantee that curves will be a breeze for you. And you can do all of the things that we did today yourself very quickly, maybe even quicker than me. Just remember, I don't want to confuse you. Just remember, make a copy of the background, convert it to a smart object, open camera raw, go to split toning. Now inside of split toning, hold the Alt key or the Option key, play with the hue of the shadows and the highlights. It will assume that the saturation is at 100. Select the color and then choose the saturation. After that, just play with all the sliders in there. That's what I did. You don't have to think about how much exposure I need, how much shadows I need. Just see what looks good to you. That's it. Don't even worry about clipping or anything or white balance and all of that stuff. If it looks good to you, good to go. And after that, we added some lighting effects using curves adjustment layer. I hope this video helped you, and if it did, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe, ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other future tip, trick or tutorial. I would like to take this moment and thank all these nice and amazing people for supporting this channel on Patreon and helping keep Piximperfect free for every